Some of your questions about grad school, and for some reason mitochondria, answered. So, the Bumbling Biochemist, my mission is to make biochemistry fun and accessible for all, but it's also to make grad school accessible for all in, well, I can't really give you money or anything, but I can try to make the process a little less black boxy. And so coming from outside of academia, the whole process and the whole idea of grad school can be a really foreign concept. And so I put out a call with the help of the IUBNB to see what people wanted to know about grad school and random things. And so there were some great questions. So a couple weeks ago, I did a post on some tips for like applying to grad school. Talked mostly about like the research statement and getting research experience. Today, I'll do a little more on the application front. So with like the personal statement, with identifying schools, potential labs, and importantly, seeing if this is actually the right path for you. And then I will talk more about what actually life is like in grad school, as well as postgraduate school, like after you graduate from graduate school, different things you can do for a PhD and things you don't need a PhD to do, and the fact that there are lots and lots of pathways and you don't need to get a PhD to be a scientist, and there are lots of things you can do with the PhD. There are lots of things you can do without a PhD. And it's not right for everyone. It is a lot of hard work, and there's nothing wrong if it's not for you. But let's get into some of the questions that you had. Okay, so I covered some of the questions a couple of weeks ago. So if you are interested in things about like applying to grad school, I will post the link to that, and I give some advice for making a strong application and that sort of thing. So I'll just quickly go through these. No, I did not know I wanted to do grad school in high school, even going into undergrad until like my third year or whatever. So I was pre-med, I wanted to be a doctor because I knew I liked science, I knew I liked helping people, I knew I liked biology and chemistry and all of this stuff. And so I thought that the logical thing was you become a doctor because that's what I'd seen, and I hadn't really been exposed to like actual like scientists. But when I got involved in research in undergrad, kind of ironically, just because I was trying to get things for my pre-med applications, I really fell in love with research, and learned that you could do like grad school. And so yeah, so that's how I got interested in grad school. And yes, I went right into my PhD. But that's more common in the US than in other countries. In other countries, you often do a master's first. Some people do a master's first in the US, but a lot of people just go straight into the PhD. In terms of going straight into the PhD, so I actually went straight out of grad school, out of undergrad. A lot of people take like a gap year or two, often work as a lab technician. I talked about that last time, lab assistant or lab technician or that sort of thing, to really gain research experience. And that's a really, really valuable thing. And so a lot of people do that. And I think it's a really, really great opportunity to both get experience for your application and make sure that you really do want to do research, because the PhD is going to be a lot of work and you want to make sure that it's something that you actually want to do. In terms of finding those research opportunities, whether you're in an undergrad, you can reach out to labs on campus, summer research programs, that sort of thing. And other things. So really, I talk more about this in my last the video I was referring to before, but it's really I can't really give specific advice, and it's going to depend on where you are and all of that sort of thing. So I recommend trying to find like some sort of career counselor, guidance counselor on campus if you're on a school. Google. I Google so often, and really just look, talk to people, that sort of thing, see if they're like job boards and that sort of thing. You can find research opportunities. So asking about research on viruses. And I know a lot of people have recently grown an interest in viruses. And there's a lot of great research being done. So I'm not going to talk about viruses specifically, but if there's a research topic that you're really interested in, what I recommend is that you look in the literature. So you look at like the journal articles being published and all of this stuff, and try to find ones that really, really interest you and see where that research is being done. You can then do things like you can reach out to those individual labs. And so basically there are different PhD programs. They have different formats and everything. And so for some programs like the biomedical sciences programs where I applied to, they're actually like kind of umbrella programs. So you apply to the program as opposed to applying to an actual lab. And then you try out a few labs. You do like lab rotations before choosing a lab. For other programs, you actually have to apply directly to a lab. And in those cases, it's really, really important that you identify that lab when you apply. And so you want to make sure that they have the funding and stuff to take on a student. They're looking for students. They're not about to like retire or something. If you contact a lab, you do not want to just like give them a boilerplate email that you copied and pasted and sent to 50 different people. That's not cool. And they will be able to tell, like, this person just like copied and pasted this email, like they didn't even know my name. Maybe they copied and pasted someone else's name in there. That would be really, really bad. So whatever you do, make sure you have the right name. But really personalize the emails if you're going to send them an email. Mention like some of the recent work that you were interested in. Don't just like copy and paste the titles though. That's just like anybody could do that. You want to show that you actually read the paper or whatever and add questions about it, like specific questions, or you had ideas or that sort of thing. So really show that you are interested in their work. You don't just like, you're not just title dropping, if that's a phrase, I guess. And so, yeah, so really, but don't just send emails to like a bazillion people. Try to find people that you would really be interested in. This is less important if you're applying to a program where you're doing rotations. But with any, like, especially because like most of the time, those places, I don't think that the lab actually has any say in whether or not you actually get accepted if you're applying to the program itself, as opposed to if you are going to a single lab. But there still is value sometimes in reaching out to individual labs if you really, really think that you want to do work in their lab, because you do not want to get there and then find out that they're retiring or they don't have money for a student or that sort of thing. And then there aren't any other labs you are interested in. So no matter what, if it's like a program where you're applying to multiple labs, you want to make sure that there are multiple labs there that you'd be interested in working in. So you want to make sure there are at least like three or like four or something labs that you'd be interested in working with in potentially. And then you can do rotations with those labs. But you don't want to get there and then find out that, well, yeah, that person isn't working here anymore, that person's not taking on students, that sort of thing. And so I encourage you to really look into the specifics of each program to know whether you need to reach out to labs, and that sort of thing, whether you're applying to the program itself or to the labs. No matter what, even if you're applying to the program, it's still okay to reach out to professors, but don't just do that boilerplate copy and paste thing. It's okay to reach out if you have like questions about their work or you're really interested in it. And this is true even if you're not like applying to grad school. Like you can always email the authors of papers and ask them questions. It can be really scary. I've done it a couple of times though and had really, really great success. But sometimes you also just like don't get a response, and that's not cool, but it happens. Professors and stuff can be really, really busy. But if you show that you're actually like, you actually read things, you actually are interested and engaged, then they are often really happy to answer questions. So if it's like just like random questions about their paper or something, I've had really great success and had some back and forths with some of the authors, and yeah, so that's been really great. But anyway, that was kind of off topic, but kind of on topic. As to how you should prepare yourself for applying to those labs, try to get as much, so read their stuff, and also like try to get as much experience as in you can before you like apply. Okay, so that questions. Can you get your PhD with, or is it important to have some work experience, subject related in undergrad to prepare for PhD? So it's really important to have research experience, whether in undergrad or like after undergrad as a lab assistant or that sort of thing. It does not have to be in the direct like subject that you want to do your PhD in. So you can be doing your undergrad work on like, I don't know, like yeast genetics, and then you go and do your PhD in like neurobiology or something. Like, it's okay if you have a different subject. The important thing is really that you have research experience. And sometimes they really value like diverse experiences in terms of your research because you come in with like a kind of different way of thinking about things. But what's really important is that you have that scientific thinking, that critical thinking skill set that you can get when you're doing research in basically any field. So don't worry about if your research isn't exactly in the thing that you want to be doing your PhD in, because that's kind of like the point of the PhD is that you're learning, right, at school. So even when you go to your postdoc, so like a postdoctoral research position where you're doing research after your PhD in like a different lab, you can do that in like a different like subfield because you're in training, you're learning, and so it's okay if you don't have experience in the exact thing that you wanted to do your work in. For example, I thought that I wanted to go into neuroscience, so I actually did one summer research program doing like nanobiopsy of like Huntington's disease like cell models. So it was like totally unrelated to anything that I'm doing now, basically. But I learned a lot, and that was a super, super valuable research experience. And so I do definitely think that it helped me get to where I am today, but it was totally unrelated to the work I'm doing today. How did you prepare a personal statement for graduate school? Man, you're bringing me back lots of years. With your personal statement, you want to tell them why you are right for their school and why their school is right for you. So your personal statement, it's really important that you read the instructions because they'll typically ask you similar but potentially partly different questions. It might have different word limits and that sort of thing. And you want to show that you can follow the instructions and that you're not just copying and pasting the same application statement for every school. You can use like the same, a lot of it you can use the same for the different applications because for the parts that you're like talking about yourself, but you really want to make sure you customize, especially in like the last paragraph usually, for the specific school that you're applying to, why that school is right for you, what labs potentially you'd be interested in, that sort of thing. Make sure that you personalize these statements for each school. It's really important to show that you are really interested in them, because, and not just like applying to a bazillion schools, and in with like the same, just because you want to get in someplace. You want to show that you actually have an interest in getting into that specific school and potentially going to that school. And so you want to, well, you also want to make sure that you actually do have an interest in going to that school. And so when you're doing your research onto why you might want to go to that school, then you can be telling them those things about why you want to go to the school. And don't just say like, oh, because you have like you're number one on college rankings or whatever. No, you want to be like specific things about that school or that program, specific labs, that sort of thing that make you interested in working there. And so you want to like, you can, but you also want to show them why they should want you, as opposed to why you just want, why you want them. And so you want to talk about, so in your research statement, that's where you're going to be talking the most about your research. But in your personal statement, you can be talking, you can like, you also want to kind of like tie the two statements together. So incorporate how the research experience has fit into your broader life. Talk about other experiences outside of the strict research that have influenced your development as a scientist and your desire to be a scientist. So talk about how, like, show concrete examples. So don't just say, I want to be a scientist and I always wanted to be a scientist or whatever. Like, show how you made a or like don't say like I have strong leadership skills or that sort of thing. Show them like, yes, I started this club and led this, or I led this club. If you say that you care about people, well, show them like, yes, I care about people. I volunteered at a hospice working with dying elderly patients because I have this deep caring for people and I wanted to research neurodegenerative diseases, and this really helped me understand what these patients might be going through, and furthered my desire to help them. Okay, so that sort of thing. And so you want to show them concrete examples of like how you are doing the thing, how you display the traits that you say you have. So don't just tell them, you want to show them. And you want to make it unique. You can you can make it like, try not to, like, you can make it less like dry or whatever, but you want to kind of how to tie it together, so make it flow well throughout. Maybe tie in something in the beginning, tie in the beginning to the end of it somehow, um, and that will help give it some like flavor to make it stand out. And it's totally okay if you have experiences that are like totally unrelated to science. Like if you won the national like baton twirling award or whatever, go ahead and put that in, but talk about how that baton twirling award, how doing that, maybe the practicing for it, you developed like skills and fine motor control that will help you at the microscope, and your commitment to working hours on baton twirling has like transformed into your commitment for working hard in the lab or something. I don't know, but just show how all of your experiences have contributed to the scientist you are today and the scientist you want to be with their help. And so yeah, so just be yourself, show them who you are. This is your one chance kind of to be more creative and less boilerplate than just like typing in your grades and you're uploading your transcripts and all of that stuff. This is your chance to kind of show them who you are as a person, or at least try to. So because remember, they're only going to see like this one thing, or I mean, not just this one thing, but this is going to be a part of, they don't get to see like the whole you. And so hopefully this will help them at least consider you for an interview where you'll be able to really show them who you are, but I mean, like not fully or whatever. And also remember that with all these applications, a lot of it comes down to luck and who's like rating your application and all of this stuff. So really don't feel bad if you don't get an offer for an interview or to go to the school. And yeah, so there are places you can get, like I'll post a link to some grad school advice stuff from other places with like examples and stuff. So it's going to be really school dependent. I was actually hoping I'd be able to share my statement with you, but I have searched my computer and I cannot locate those files. I will see if I maybe can ask the school if they still have my statement. I don't know if they keep up those things. Probably not, because why would they? But maybe, I don't know. Because in case that would help anyone. But yeah, I can't find it. I can only find like grant ones and stuff, which aren't directly relevant. But I'm not just trying to be mean and not keep it from you. Okay, but anyway, next question. Exciting update. I just heard back from the school, and they are going to send me a copy of my statement. So hopefully on Monday I will be able to post that up on my blog. And hopefully that will help people. Although remember, you need to make sure you make it school specific and person specific. So like, don't just copy and paste my statement or it won't make any sense.
Okay, can you get your PhD without having any publications? So I'm not sure if you mean, the answer is yes. But well, I guess depending on your program. But if you're talking about can you get into grad school without any publications? Yes, yes, yes. I was totally afraid of this. I still don't have any publications. I'm getting close to submitting my first paper. But I did not have any publications going into grad school. I talk a little more about this in my that post from a couple weeks ago. But it's important that you have some experience presenting your research, but this can just be like a poster presentation. Poster presentations are super valuable. It can be a presentation just like in your school, that sort of thing. Local science chapter committees of like school, like college organizations, whatever. Anyway, it's important that you have some experience like talking to other people about your research, but it's totally okay if you don't have publications. A lot of times getting a publication when you're like in undergrad and that sort of thing is a lot of luck. Like if you're in a big lab that's publishing a bunch of papers, even if maybe you're doing a really small thing, they'll put your name on the paper. I'm not saying you don't deserve it. I'm just saying that then you get your name on publications, even though someone who is working very, very hard, but in a small lab and their research doesn't end up actually making its publication, they won't have a publication. That happened to me. Wouldn't change it for the world. I had an amazing experience, but I didn't get any publications out of my undergrad research. But in my applications, I was able to explain all the work that I did. I also did like poster presentations at conferences and stuff. But as long as you're able to show that you know how to talk about your research and see its place in the bigger scientific community, the bigger picture of things, then it's okay if you don't have publications. As to actually getting through grad school without a publication, some schools require that you have a publication before you graduate. Others just require that you have like one in the process or whatever, and some have like no real requirements. Because publication it can be a lot of luck in some cases, as I was mentioning, some similar thing to like the undergrad. With the PhD though, typically you'll have like a main publication where you're the first author, so you're like the main author, you did the most work on it. That's your PhD research basically. So it's like a shorter version of your giant thesis, without all the like sidetracked projects and that sort of thing. But this paper, so basically when you submit to a journal, I've talked about this in past posts, but there's like this long process of peer review. So basically they send your paper to other like scientists to look over, and then they request like additional experiments and that sort of thing. So it can be a super long process. And so that's part of the reason why schools don't always require you to have a publication before you graduate, because that can take a really, really long time, even once the work is finished, just doing all like the logistical stuff and that sort of thing. I'm hoping that it won't take too long for me. It's also like journal specific. So there's some journals where it's like a lot easier to just like get it published right away. These days you can also do like preprints, and so I'm guessing that some schools will like take that as a publication type of thing. So preprint where it hasn't been peer reviewed yet. But yeah, so hopefully in the not too distant future, I will have my preprint up, and then at the same time while it's under review at a journal. And then once it's up, I will be able to tell you guys all about it, and I'm really excited about that. But anyway, enough about me. Today is about you, so let's keep going. What's lab life like? So lab life is going to definitely depend on the lab, which and the like your research project, your field of research, and that sort of thing. So if you are in a program where you get to do rotations, that's a really great opportunity to just like try out a few different labs, because things are going to depend on like the lab environment is totally going to depend on the people in the lab. Those are the people that you're going to be spending the most time with. So typically the PI, like the primary investigator or principal investigator, so like the head of the lab, your boss. Most of the time, unless it's like often with like younger PIs, smaller labs, that sort of thing, they'll actually like work in the lab sometimes, but usually with the more like bigwig scientists and that sort of thing, they typically work most of the time on like writing grants and overseeing things. And so they're like in their office and not in the actual lab. So the atmosphere in the lab is really going to depend on the people in the lab. So like the fellow students, postdocs, senior scientists, technicians, all of those people who are really going to serve as your day-to-day mentors and friends. And so that's going to be really important as to determining what the lab environment is like. As to what like the actual work that you're doing, that's totally going to depend on your project in your field. So if you're like in some like computational program, then you're going to be like spending a lot of time on your computer. If you're like me and are just like, oh, wet lab rat, you're going to be running all over the lab, purifying proteins, making messes. But I'm cleaning them up, don't worry. Doing like, but basically like for my life, whatever, like every day is totally different and there's no like average day, which I find really exciting, because I get to do all of these different things. And that's one of the things that I love most about like biochemistry, is that I'm constantly getting to try new things and learn new things. So even though like I've graduated, even though all this stuff, I'm still like learning new things and trying new things. Like just the other day I was like trying cross-linking for the first time. I'm going to try it again, larger scale next week, and I'm excited. But yeah, so basically there's always new things that you're doing, and there is no one like typical day, which is why like when people ask you that, it's like there is no typical day, which is part of the great thing. That's at least for like research in grad school. I've never worked for a private company's lab, and I don't know what it would be like there. And yeah, so also if you're like a lab technician, which as I talked about, is a really great way to get lab experience. And some people actually like either just after bachelor's or their master's or whatever, they'll take a lab technician role and more of a long term and kind of like build up to like this more of a senior scientist level, like research assistant or whatever. I don't know, there are different terms. But typically if you are in like one of those like assistant positions or whatever, that work tends to be more monotonous and more like scheduled, because basically you're specializing in kind of like the not so fun experiments, but that are really important, like maintaining cell culture, doing mini preps, all of this various sort of thing. And so there your routine will be more, I mean, not like totally set, because people are going to have different needs at different times, but you have less freedom than if you are doing like your own thing. But yeah, so I've never worked in a private company's lab. I'm guessing in some of them you have a lot less freedom, but I don't know for sure. And I'm not going to try to speculate because I don't know. Okay, so you're considering a PhD, but confused about choosing a topic. What are the opportunities after PhD? Okay, we'll get to that stuff. But so basically first, so these are two questions like from the same person. And so the first thing I would say is, so why are you considering pursuing a PhD is the first thing. So basically, if you are just doing it because you don't know what to do next, then that is not, I would advise you to really think about why you would want the PhD, and not just doing it because you don't know what to do next and you've been in school your whole life and PhD seems like the next logical thing. As I talked about in my post on applying to grad school, this is one of the things that they want to make sure that you're not doing, that they want to make sure that you actually want to go to grad school. And so you want to make sure that you want to go to grad school, and then you want to convince them that you want to go to grad school. So it's important that you know that you want to go to grad school. If you're confused about a field or whatever, so what basically my recommendation for you is to try to get a research like assistantship or that sort of thing, depending on where you are in your undergrad program or wherever you are, I'm not sure. But if you try to get experience in labs, in organic chemistry, in genetics, so in the fields that you're interested in, and see if you really like it. So it'd be great if you could get some research experience in both and then compare. But I would advise you to really try to find what would make you happier. I don't think that there's one like right path for any one person. I think that people could be happy, and like I think you could honestly, if you are really passionate about both of them, I think that you could find a fulfilling life in either of the fields. That being said, if you are just like, you want to make sure that you really do want that PhD though. And so I'll get into more about what the hurdles those are as you talked about. But so you're not interested in lectureship and teaching, and that is totally fine. There are definitely like positions where it's more teaching focused, and like professorships or whatever. There are positions where it's more research focused and positions where it's more teaching focused. And a lot of that's going to depend on basically the university that you're at, whether it's like research intensive, so like an R01 school, or whether it's more like undergrad focused, so like primarily undergraduate institution or a PUI, where it's more like teaching focused. And so basically you want to, there are different, you would have different teaching responsibilities in those various things and different amounts of times. So if you're at like a research focused place, you could be spending most of your time doing research and very little of it doing teaching, although you might have some teaching responsibilities, minor ones. You can also get positions that are like research institutes as opposed to like schools. And then there's also industry. So there are lots of opportunities if you want to do research. And then there are a lot of opportunities outside of doing research. So a lot of people get a PhD and then go into other things like writing, journalism, policy, industry, all sorts of various things. But it's also important to note that a lot of those you don't need the PhD for. So a lot of those jobs you can do with just a bachelor's or just a master's. And so basically there are a lot of things that you can do with a PhD, a lot of different things, and you don't have to go into teaching. And having a PhD can help you. I really don't know much about like job hiring and that sort of thing, but I know that having you can do a ton of different things with the PhD. And I encourage you to like Google it. I don't know. Sorry. I really do just Google a ton of things. There's some really great resources out there. But as to I do think though that it's important that you really make sure that you want to get that PhD though. If so, I kind of encourage you to try to get research experience, see if that's something that you really like. And as opposed, and in terms of like lectureship and teaching versus like, so basically with the next step of your career. Okay, so I talked more a while back about the next step of my career. I'm going to be doing a postdoctoral research fellowship. And so that's where you go to another lab and you get more research experience. I'm going to go to UCSF, Dr. Janisa Fujimori's lab, and doing like learning chemical biology, which I'm really excited about. And so I'm just finishing up here, trying to get my paper published before I go. When and how did you plan your postdoc position, and how did you apply? Did you choose something related or unrelated to your field? Okay, so I had a really lucky experience, I guess, applying and planning for my postdoc, in that I found this lab I was really interested in and they were interested in me. And so that was a really great opportunity. But how did I find them? So basically I was interested in, I looked for things that I was interested in. And so I was interested in chemical biology, which is basically like the more chemistry side focus side of biochemistry. So looking at the levels of like bonds and atoms and synthesizing things and seeing how they interact with proteins and DNA and RNA and all of this various stuff. As opposed to more of the biology side of biochemistry. And so it's related to my field, but also unrelated to my field, in that it'll be more of the chemical biology things side of things instead of like more of the protein biochemistry side of things. But I'll be able to help mentor people about the protein biochemistry stuff, and they'll be able to help teach me stuff about the chemistry. So I'm really excited about that because I really want to be able to teach chemistry and biochemistry to undergrads. Okay, so basically I looked, I also wanted to find a program where they had this thing called ARACTA, which is this program to help train people to be teachers for undergraduates, basically. And so UCSF, so University of California, San Francisco, they had this program. And so they were one of the places I was looking at. And I found Dr. Fujimori's lab, and I found their research. So I was just basically looking through all the different scientists. And I realized that this was a scientist that was, her work was really, really fascinating to me. And so I wrote a cover letter. So basically you typically write like a cover letter. So like just a short intro saying like who you are, why you're interested in the work, where you are currently, that sort of thing, and then send my CV. And then if I was lucky enough that she was interested in setting up a meeting, as this was during the whole lockdown and everything. So I did a Zoom interview with her, and then that went really well. And then we scheduled a Zoom interview with like everybody in the lab. So typically when you're doing like a postdoc search, you will go to, or like pre-COVID times or whatever, at least if you were in the country, they would like pay for you to go out and you would meet with everyone in the lab and give a research presentation, interview, that sort of thing. So for me, it was all over Zoom, but I still gave a research presentation. And then I met with the various people in the lab, and it was just like a fantastic experience. And I felt really, really right at home. And so I was very, very, very grateful that then she set up another meeting with just me. And we talked about potential research projects and that sort of thing. And now I have everything in place. I just need the start date, which is going to depend on when my publication gets accepted. But yeah, so that's basically how I planned and applied for my postdoc. But the basic idea is that you identify labs that you're interested in, get your CV together, right? Cover letter. You want to make sure that you really like know why you would be interested in that person's lab. So this is kind of going back to when you're applying to grad school. So you want to really do your work and make sure that this is actually something that you're interested in, and you want to be able to show how you would be able to add to the lab, as well as what you're hoping to learn from the lab. And so they know that this is a training experience for you still. So you can go to some place to learn new skills. So I'm going to be learning more chemistry, but you also want to be able to show them that you have things that you can bring to the lab. So I have a lot of protein biochemistry experience that I can bring to the lab, as well as like RNA biochemistry work and stuff. And so that you want to be able to show that. And so both sides of the thing. That's the basic idea with that. Okay, so what are the hurdles with doing PhD? There are a lot of hurdles with doing a PhD, and it's totally going to depend on you, your lab, your experiment. There's so much variability. I also want to say that I am super privileged in that I am not having to like take care of family, and either financially or personally. And if you are, that can definitely make things way more challenging. The PhD system is really, there's a lot of expectations that you'll do a lot of hard work for not that much money. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that I totally recognize that I am in a very privileged position to not have to worry too much about like I don't have to worry about childcare. I don't have to worry about supporting a family, and that it can be an issue for some people. And I really like don't want to discourage people. I know people who have families while doing a PhD. I don't want to say it'll be like super duper easy, because that's going to be added burden on top of all of the other hurdles that I'm going to talk about. But I just wanted to lay that out there at front, at first, that it will definitely make things harder, but it doesn't have to make things impossible. And so don't let that deter you if at all possible. I also wanted to mention that in terms of payment, so I didn't know this before, but grad schools, they actually like pay you a stipend. So it's not like a ton of money, but it's hopefully enough to live on. And basically it's kind of like the PhDs, your like job. And so often you have like teaching responsibilities where you have to like TA or something. It really depends on program to program what and whether like how the funding system works. But unlike medical school or whatever, where you're actually paying to go, here they're paying you. but you do a lot of work. And so it's definitely not like an hourly basis type of thing. Um, Hopefully you'll be in a good lab where you'll want to be doing all that work, and where your PI, so like your boss, isn't forcing you. Like when you're rotating in labs or whatever, just try to find some place where there's not like a culture of where everybody's always in the lab like 24/7, 7 days a week, or I guess that's what the 7 and 24/7 is. But anyway, you want to find a lab where people actually have time for themselves, for their families, for all of the various things, in a more relaxed environment if possible. But do expect that there will be a lot of work. A lot of the hurdles, like, so once, yeah, so a lot of them can be, I mean, it's totally going to depend on you and your project. And so there are like personal hurdles, and then there's also like experimental hurdles. And so sometimes you might be in a lab where there's just like a really bad environment, there's really bad people, you're not getting the support you need, the mentorship you need, that sort of thing. And that can be really hard. So it's really important that you find a good lab with supportive people. Hurdles in terms of like experiments, sometimes experiments just will not work, or you find that there was like a contaminant in your experiment and you try something over and over. I mean, well, you don't want to just try something over and over, but you want to try it with like changing different variables and that sort of thing. But there can be so many variables and so much optimizing. Like seriously, like going through all of the stuff that I've done, like writing my thesis, like the big document describing all the work I've done, and then like writing my paper, and realizing that I spent so much time trying to do like all the optimization and troubleshooting and trying to figure out what's going on. And then like for your paper or whatever, it's like 5 figures from like 5 experiments that came from months and months and years of troubleshooting and optimization. So sometimes things just aren't working out, and you can be spending a lot of time, and sometimes it feels like you're never going to get there or whatever. And so that can be really, really hard. Yeah, so there can be some definite some ups and downs, and that's why it's really important that you have support people. Okay, so this question was kind of confusing for me, but basically this, so Gary has a girlfriend who might do a PhD in psychology, and he wants to help make the process easier for her, which I think is very, very nice that you want to help your girlfriend. I do want to stress that the work, like that your girlfriend's work should, like, in order to get her PhD, she should have to do her own original work. And so you can't make that part easier for her, really, because the PhD is supposed to be hard. So it shouldn't be miserable, but it should be hard work. You have to actually like earn it. And I'm not trying to say like that in terms of like a hard luck or trial by fire or anything like that. I'm totally, totally, totally in favor of strong mentorship of PhD students. I think it's really important to foster them through the scientific growth. But at the end, they should be like an independent scientist that can do their own work. And it's really important that they learn how to do all of everything for themselves. I'm not saying like they have to learn for themselves, but they need to learn how to be doing it by themselves. So by the time they graduate, they should be like a more independent scientist. So basically they need to be doing their own work, like every step of the work, from the experimental design to the writing up, because those are skills that you're going to need over and over again as a scientist. But you can definitely be there to support her emotionally. And so a PhD can be a lot of ups and downs emotionally, and sometimes she might need space, sometimes she might just need to talk. And so you can definitely be there as an emotional support. But I would not try to do any of her work for her, or that sort of thing. But I would say that you can definitely be there to support her emotionally, and just be there as a person for her to rant and vent, and that sort of thing too. But thank you for caring about her. This brings me to this person, Anmol. So I'm in the second year of graduate school, and I've lost motivation and interest in science. It's so weird, and whatever I imagined and worked hard all these years doesn't seem to excite me anymore. I don't know if it's just me or my PhD topic or the work environment, or it's just a phase in graduate school that's causing me the loss of interest. I'm really lost at this point in time. And honestly, when I read this, I got like, I just wanted to hug this person, and I have no idea who you are. But here's what I have to say about this.
One of the main takeaways I want you to take away from this is that there are lots of things that you can do with a PhD. You don't just have to go into teaching. But you don't need a PhD to do a lot of things as well. And so a PhD isn't for everyone. It's not an easy journey. And sometimes it can be really miserable for some people. And there is absolutely no shame in leaving a PhD program. That does not mean you can't take the pressure. That does not mean you can't handle it. That means that you know yourself. You know that it's not like a healthy environment for you to be in, that you know it's not for you, and that there are so many other things you can also do. And so, as I'll get into, there are some things like sometimes in programs you can actually leave with a master's, and you can do all sorts of things with a master's, even with a bachelor's. And so before you actually go into doing a PhD, that's why part of the reason why it's so important that you have this, you try to get like research experience in your undergrad, like I was talking about a couple weeks ago. But just because you leave a PhD program, you are not quitting. You are not like not tough enough to handle it. Sometimes like it's a very I'm sure it's a very, very hard decision to actually leave. And definitely, even for me, there were like times where I felt like leaving, but it was never like this permanent thing. Like, I always felt like it was the place for me to be. So, if it doesn't feel like it is the right thing for you, it is totally fine to leave. And I encourage you to talk to someone in your program, or someone that maybe like, I don't know, that's one of the hard things about academia too, is that it can be really hard to find people, trusted to people to talk to, especially when like everything is so tight knit. But try to find someone that you can talk to. Maybe if it's part of, also you need to make sure when you're joining a lab, try to make sure that it's really, really a good lab. You have good mentorship, good people, and it's not something that you're going to be miserable, because YOLO, you only live once, and you don't want to be working in like a toxic environment. You don't want to be working in a place where people don't value you, people don't value your work, and you don't value yourself. And so science should be fun. A PhD program should be hard, but it shouldn't be miserable. And if you are miserable and you don't need the PhD for what you want to do, maybe you're not even sure what you want to do, you can totally, I mean, yes, you can, if you decide later on that the PhD was really what you wanted to do, maybe it was just the wrong lab or something, try again. But it's not like you are like quitting because you can't handle the pressure or anything. You are leaving because you know that it's right for you. And so, as much as I loved grad school most of the time, and as passionate I am about science, and that passion is really what kept me going through a lot of the hard times. If you don't have that passion, then it's not like you're a lesser person. It's just you have passion for other things, and this isn't the right place for you. This isn't the right program for you. Something isn't right, and that is totally fine to leave. And that is totally, I super duper respect that decision. You know yourself. You know that there are lots of other things that you can do without needing this PhD. And so please, please do not take anything I say about grad school and how I talk about it being hard, or how I talk about it being amazing. Those are just my own thoughts and my own opinions and all of this sort of thing. And I do not want you to get the feeling that you need to you need to go through grad school to be a scientist. And there are lots of things you can do without actually going through grad school. And grad school is not for everyone, and just because it's not for you does not mean it's because you cannot handle it.
Okay, and now for the final random question. Do we have a single picture to describe all reactions occurring in mitochondria? I don't know about all reactions, but if you go to the IUBMB website, they have these Nicholson metabolic maps, mini maps, and anti maps. So created by Donald Nicholson, a late professor from the University of Leeds in England. So he has these metabolic pathway charts that you can get for free on the IUBMB's website, and you can also like order through Sigma, really poor. But basically, they have this huge metabolic pathways chart. They actually have an interactive version too on Sigma's website, where you can like zoom into the mitochondria or just zoom into anywhere and see more details about the various things. But basically, if you want to look at the mitochondrial reactions, they're going to be here. You can also, there's this mini map where you can see the mitochondrial, just the mitochondrial stuff. And yeah, so you can download these for free. And so hopefully that kind of answered your question. They also have some really cool animations, some of the like maps and that sort of thing. So I encourage you to check this out, and I can post a link to that. And yeah, so thank you all for everybody who asked questions, and hopefully this was helpful for you and for other people as well. So I sincerely wish you all the best of luck in whatever journey you choose to take in your life.